Hello, hi, this is Barb Mangami, also known as Coach B, and you may call me Gogo. Togazani, good evening. How is everyone doing today? Somebody asked me, and I'm going to explain it right away before I forget. Somebody asked me, why are we calling you Gogo now? You went from being Coach B, Auntie B, now you're Gogo. What is that? Well, I'll explain it. When you call me Gogo, you are recognizing the ancestors that walk with me, the female ancestors that walk with me. And so when you say Togozani Gogo, you're actually greeting not just me, but you're greeting the whole entourage of ancestors that come with me. And I would respond by greeting you back and saying Togozani as a way of acknowledging the ancestors that are your entourage. And this is so apt because our topic today is the ancestors. Your ancestors are waiting for you. They really are. But I want us to answer some questions. So I've got a list of questions because I have been talking about this quite a bit on other platforms. And I thought I will take the questions that were coming up and try to answer them as fully as I can on this. Obviously, this platform is great because I have a lot of time that I can spend talking to you guys, whereas on TikTok and other platforms, my time is limited in trying to explain things that are actually really profound. So the question always is, well, who are my ancestors? And for many of us who are from the African continent, that is not a sort of difficult thing to try to answer or handle because, well, my ancestors are my parents, if they are deceased, followed by my grandparents and then my great-grandparents and then my koko or kokobami. The kokos are your great-great-grandparents and so on and so forth lineage-wise. I want to tell you something. For my diaspora, African brothers and sisters, that is absolutely no different for you. It is indeed your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and so on and so forth. The problem comes with the mental schism that happens in a lot of Africans in the diaspora, like African Americans, who for some reason, and I think it has a lot to do with what they have been taught or how they've been educated, they seem to get stuck at the point at which slavery happens. And so as far as they are concerned, somehow in their minds, it's very hard to conceptualize of a lineage of ancestors that extends before slavery happened. And so they come stuck, especially as we are trying to bridge this gap, to build this bridge between Africans in the diaspora and Africans in the homeland. This bridge, which is really, really important if we are to transcend and to grow and to become the powerful people that we are supposed to be as a community, right? So it's important to understand this, that your lineage does not end when slavery happened. So you don't trace your lineage up until slavery and then say, well, I have no connection to the motherland because I don't know which part of the continent I came from. That doesn't even matter. As I've said before, and I'm going to say it again, many of us on the African continent are descendants of all sorts of ethnicities. And I don't use the word tribe on purpose because tribe is a colonial construct that was set up to divide and conquer. And as a result, we have tribal wars because different tribes, based on the colonial definition of tribes, are pitted one against the other. In essence, African people are all the same. This is why there's a great Pan-African movement to bring all countries in Africa so that we recognize that we are one. Borderless countries, no passports, and so on. And so I want you to extend in your imagination this Pan-Africanism to a sort of global Pan-Africanism, which includes the diasporas as well. This is really critical, kindred. I need you guys to really understand and tap into this current energy that is calling us to unite and come together. And in order to do that, we need to build that bridge. So no, your ancestry goes all the way back into the continent, which essentially makes you as African as I am. Now, the next question I always have is, okay, so how do I know where my ancestors are from? Doesn't matter. Most of us only know our ancestry up to 4th, 5th generation, right? Up until 4th, 5th generation, many of us know our ancestry. Beyond that, we don't. Because there was no set record. There were no records kept diligently about the lives of African people on the continent, right? Also, even this information that I teach you guys, you're not going to find a lot of it in books because we are a people of oral tradition. And so there wasn't a lot that was documented in writing. There was a lot that was documented in cave paintings. There was a lot that was passed on one generation to another. Unfortunately, when colonization came, our spirituality, our culture, our social norms, anything to do with African people was deemed insignificant and invalid, and therefore nobody really bothered to record it, right? And so we have a whole period in our history where there was some oral history passed on, but we have these huge gaps when things were interrupted. So when our development was arrested and our own growth as a people was interrupted, we also find that our culture was interrupted and so many things were sort of cut. Does that make sense to you? So in the same way that you feel cut off from the continent by slavery, which is a very traumatic and seismic event for our people, it's the same way we felt sort of separated or cut away from our culture and what is essentially us by colonization. I just want you guys to understand that we're actually more alike than we are different, right? Okay, so now where your ancestors doesn't matter, because right now your ancestors are right there where you are. Your ancestors, my ancestors are right here where I am. The ancestors are probably listening in and taking part in this conversation. Why do I say that? Your ancestors are not in some heaven somewhere or some hell or some other place that is removed from you. Understand that your ancestors are just a dimension away from you, right? You don't see them because your energetic vibration is not high enough to meet and align with them to the extent that you can see or hear them, right? But your ancestors are not far from you. So why bother? Why do I even want to call on these ancestors, right? Why do I want to have anything to do with this? How does this information about my ancestors help me? Great question. How does it help you? I'll ask you a question to answer that question. How's your life doing so far? Really, seriously. How is your place in the world? How do you feel about the way you are treated in this world? How do you feel about your sense of groundedness? How do you feel about being essentially you? You see, what it is that your ancestors are your root. Imagine that you're a tree. Your ancestors are the root that taps into the soil and brings in the nourishment that you would need as a tree to grow, to flourish, and to bear fruit, correct? Now, if you are cut off from that root and you're planted somewhere, you'll grow. You might not bear fruit though, because you're not rooted and you're not taking in enough nutrients to make you flourish and bear fruit. So understand that sometimes this yearning and this feeling that you have of being unanchored, this feeling and yearning that you sometimes have of being rudderless, like a ship on a turbulent sea with no captain. Ever felt that? That's because you are not aligned with your ancestors. That is because you are not guided by your ancestors. So why should you call on your ancestors? Essentially, walking through your life with your ancestors means that you are guided, you are protected. Prosperity comes to you. It also means you are a highly spiritual being, because in order for you to connect well with your ancestors, you have to be able to be elevated enough spiritually to do what? To hear them, to feel them, to sense them, to dream them so they can pass on messages. Understand that your ancestors want the very best for you. That's all they've ever wanted. Understand, though, that your ancestors will never impose on you. Your ancestors are not going to see you getting into trouble and come charging through to help you. Unless, of course, you have invited them into your life. Unless, of course, you have invited and instructed them to guide you, to protect you, to prosper you, to protect your children. Your ancestors have a vested interest in you doing well. You know why? Because when you elevate and you do well, they elevate and do well. You have to remember that your ancestors are spirit beings who came from Creator, are a part of Creator, came into this realm as spirit beings in a human body, right? When this human body dies, that spirit is still there. And in order for them to return back to source, they have to elevate and elevate. And the only way they elevate is when you are in communion with them, when you feed them, when you talk to them, when you love on them, they elevate. And in turn, they lavish their love on you. They make sure you get any and everything that you need. Does that make sense? I really hope this makes sense. And I hope that it hits home to you. I smile when I talk about my ancestors because I adore my ancestors. I love my ancestral walk. It's something so exquisite. The only way to describe it is experience it. Your life will never be the same, and it shouldn't be the same. Your life should elevate. As African children walking this planet, we are the oldest people. We hold the oldest wisdom and knowledge. The rejection of our traditions, the rejection of our ancestors is one of the biggest travesties that has ever happened to us. The separation of us as African people from our ancestors and nature, from our communion with the cosmos, through melanin, through our ability to see and access other realms easily, is the biggest travesty that ever happened to us. Through colonization, through slavery, and through current day practices and laws that continue to keep us subjugated. There is a way around that. That is to call on your ancestors to join you in the walk that we're in. I started doing these talks when Black Lives Matter started, way back in March, I think it was. And I remember thinking to myself, I will never be the same again. Because I knew in that moment that my calling was to talk to any Black African person who would listen about how important it was to invoke our ancestors in the struggles that we are working through on the streets. As an activist, it became so clear to me that unless we invoke the ancestors in an active and practical way, we would always find ourselves century after century, decade after decade, stuck in that same place of fighting, then stopping, nothing changes. We fight again, nothing changes. And I said to myself, we are going to have to be the generation that shifts things, because we're not going into this alone. We're going to be invoking the ancestors. We are going to create relationships with this sea of ancestors. Close your eyes and imagine all the ancestors that fell in the Atlantic on that transatlantic journey. Imagine all the ancestors that fell on plantations, all the ancestors that fell in wars of liberation on the African continent, rising with us. When we call on them individually, we call on them collectively as nation states, as communities. We call on them, we drum, beat those drums till they rise with us. And then we march on to take what is ours. I don't say to ask for what we want, because actually we don't have to ask anybody for anything. We take what is ours respectfully, ma'am. All right? That is why it is important to walk with your ancestors. So how do I connect with my ancestors was another question. How do I connect my ancestors? I don't even know where to start. It's easy. It's really easy. Do you know your grandparents, if they're gone, if they're passed? Do you know some uncles who've passed? Right? Think of your ancestors, maybe even write a list of your ancestors, your favorite ancestors, because the idea is you want to call in the ancestors that are of the light. You want to call in your ancestors that you were fond of and who were fond of you, because they're the ones who are most likely to respond quicker to you, right? And so what you want to do to call in your ancestors, first and foremost, is really simple. is you want to build a space for them, a little altar for your ancestors, right? It doesn't have to be anything big and elaborate, right? Just a small little place where you put a table. Maybe you put a white tablecloth on it. You put maybe their favorite things on it. You might put a Bible if they were Christian. And I know I've had a hard time with the Bible thing because, you know what, I'm like, when I said no to the Bible and Christianity, it became very difficult for me to put a Bible on my altar. But I did, you know why? Because my grandmother, who I adore, was a staunch Christian. So you're doing these things not to edify you, but to edify them. So put a Bible there if they like the Bible. If you know they like rum or whiskey, go get a fine whiskey. Or what you can afford, always what you can afford. They understand. But don't go cheap on them, because if you go cheap on them, then they're going to go cheap on you, okay? Don't do that. Whatever it is you can afford, go get that, put it on the altar, right? Then before anything else, you want to cleanse your space. You want to cleanse your space of any negative entities, any negative energies that could be coming around and that could interfere with your communication with your ancestors. Right? And then what you want to do after that is, how do you cleanse? You're going to ask me, we're going to do a whole thing on cleansing. But for now, how do you cleanse your ancestral space? You can burn, for us, open a window slightly, especially us over here who live in cold climes. You're going to need to open a window slightly. Right? Then what you want to do is maybe you want to burn sage. Now, there is this controversy with white sage. Please do not use white sage for cleansing. It is not for cleansing purposes only. It is literally part of a bigger ritual that is done by Native Americans. And in order to respect that ritual, please do not tamper with white sage. Also, please do not burn sage, in white sage rather, in an uncleansed space, because there are some dark entities that actually like the smell of white sage. FYI. In Africa, we use what is called umpepo. Umpepo, we burn umpepo. Umpepo, when you burn it, it's a very sacred thing, right? So what you want to do is you want to get regular sage. There are different kinds of sage. Just stay away from the white sage. That'll cleanse your space. You want to take, to smudge with rosemary. Rosemary is very great for cleansing a space, right? You want to smudge with cedar, right? So you can buy different kinds of cleansings. You might want to burn Palo Santo, right? That is also a great thing to cleanse a space, right? So then you've cleansed your space and you want to sit there, put a glass of water, because you are having them come in. Whenever you have visitors, at least where I come from, you always have a glass of water. Sometimes you have a basin of water so they can wash their hands, but a glass of water will do, right? You've got their favorite things. You might even want to play their favorite music. But the thing to do is create a space that you and them commune and sit and talk to them. In Ubungoma and in Southern Africa, we call it ukuphahla. Ukuphahla is literally just communing with your ancestors and calling them in. You talk to your ancestors and you invite them in. Hey, grandma. Hey, grandpa. How are you? All my ancestors who are of the light, I welcome you to this space. Thank you so much for taking care of me over the years. I appreciate that. Without you, I wouldn't be here. I am because you are, right? And you sit there and you commune. Now, here's the thing that always amazes me. I've had this. Auntie B, I called in my ancestors last night. I haven't heard anything. Listen. Your ancestors will respond when your ancestors respond. It could be literally that same night that you do your prayer. Go to bed at night and you'll dream somebody. You might dream your grandma smiling or talking to you. It could be that the next day, like I sometimes will say, if I want to hear from somebody, I'll be like, please just show me a sign. Show me a sign today. Show me a sign and make me know that it's you. And usually it's interesting because over the years, this has become consistent. My dad will usually show up as a butterfly. Literally even midwinter. Now imagine a butterfly in midwinter just coming and landing on your window, right? And I know, hey, and you know immediately that who that is. So I just say, hey, Dad, right? That's a sign to me that my Father is walking with me, that my Father is pleased with me, and that He is with me. So sometimes ancestors take long in our minds to communicate. Remember, in the ancestral realm, this time space in continuum is just one. So there is no time in the way that we understand it. So what is long for you may mean absolutely nothing to them. Understand that, especially after somebody is transitioned, you may not hear from them for a whole year. But that's because they have stuff that they need to work through themselves. Because when they transition from having been a spirit in a human body to just being pure spirit, they got a lot of stuff they might need to work out while they're in that place of kind of limbo and waiting. But they could be traveling around, experiencing different things before they are ready to say, okay, right, okay, there's Meredith, she needs me, or she's calling me, nice. But also remember, there's some ancestors who are going to come in so quick because they have been waiting for centuries. Oh, I don't want to cry. They have been waiting for centuries for somebody to venerate them. They've been waiting for centuries for someone to say, Gogo, Mkulu, how are you? This is your child so-and-so. Okay? So understand, be patient, keep doing it. You can do it once a week, maybe on a Sunday. Maybe cook your favorite meal and go and sit with them. Play their favorite music. Make a plate of food for them and just put it on your altar and eat your food while you're listening to music. Remember, these are your loved ones. They would love to come and spend time with you. They're just waiting for you to call them in. Okay? The next thing people will say is, okay, so then, right. So now I know why I need these ancestors. I also know how to call them in. Well, great. And then what? What language do I use? Like, I don't know, if the ancestor from Africa comes, are they going to start speaking to me in, I don't know, Mandinge? It's not that deep. Your ancestors are spirits. So you can communicate with your ancestors in any language that you're comfortable in. I am Shona Karanga. But I can tell you that my most comfortable language to speak to my ancestors in is in isiZulu. Okay? So I'll be like, Thokozani gogo labomkhulu, ngiyalibonga ngimntwana wenu uBarbara, ngilapha eAmerica ngicela ukulibonga ukuthi liyasigcina. And I just go into a litany of prayers to my ancestors in Zulu. I don't know why. Something tells me that I might even have a Zulu ancestor somewhere in there, who knows, who likes hearing me speak Zulu, because I literally it just comes forth. Sometimes I will do it in Shona, but it comes out really stuttering and kind of breaks my flow and my ambience. Do what feels comfortable. They hear you. They understand everything that you're saying. They also see your heart. And they see your intention. Intention is everything. Because there are a lot of people who are like, yeah, you know what? My life's a mess. I need to find my ancestors. That's all well and good. Yeah, your life's a mess. Find your ancestors. But if that's your sole purpose for finding your ancestors, well, you know what? They're going to be really disappointed, because what they're looking for from you is a real relationship. Right? And I want you to understand that sometimes it's hard for people who have been indoctrinated in Christianity, or even Islam for that matter, or any of these what I call traditional religions that have their base and in the West, meaning that, not that they're Western, but because they have been whitewashed. A lot of these religions and their way of praying or of communing either with God, well, I'll say with God, and in Catholicism, the saints, is a very abstract relationship, right? African spirituality is practical. It's very practical. We have rituals, like I just showed you. Ritual is important because rituals are what feed us and feed our ancestors. Rituals are actually the tools that we use to connect with our ancestors. And one thing I forgot to tell you is that when you set up your altar and you're inviting your ancestors, so you've got your sage going or your imbepo, and then you've got your candles. Usually you'll light a blue and yellow candle. I sometimes just do a pure white candle. Whatever works for you. You light those candles. I love the white candle. Sometimes do a white and a blue, because the white candle sort of augments any other color candle you have. And we're going to talk about candle colors and what each means and what it implies and so on and so forth. right? And so you're there sitting with your ancestors and you're sharing this beautiful space. The candles are going and that's it. And we ritual around this. We do this with intention. We do this with 100% focus because it's an act of love that you're doing for your ancestors. And believe me, you will hear back from your ancestors. This isn't some faith thing where it's like, I just gotta believe. No, they will show up. And when they show up, they're very clear. This is not some kind of obstacle test where they're trying to see whether you can figure them out. No, they'll be very clear and direct with you. And you will see or hear. And there will be things around you that show you that your ancestors have shown up. Sometimes it's literally, for me, sometimes it's just a warm feeling. I literally feel like somebody is right here with me. It's beautiful. So I just wanted to come here and share with you this idea, this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful notion of walking with your ancestors. As an African person, this is in your DNA. You hear me? This is what you were born to do. This is what you have been doing as an African person. Your people have been doing since the beginning of time. Reconnect with home. This is one amazing way to reconnect with home. I love you guys. I appreciate you. Please subscribe. Please like. Please share it out to your groups. Share it out to people. Share it out to your friends. Share it out to your families. Let's create this absolutely amazing revolution of today's African children and their ancestors. Take care, you guys. Amag.